This is Muller with George McEncroe on Disrupt Radio.
It is my great joy to introduce my next guest. Roy Ratneval is the Executive Vice President at CI Financial and Head of Distribution for CI Global Asset Management. But you are also prisoner number 1056, which is the name of your book.
Correct.
Tell us, how do you go from being an imprisoned torture survivor to the executive vice president of a global asset management company?
Awesome. Thank you for having me, and good morning. I just to give you a little bit of background story on this. I was born in Sri Lanka, and I'm sure many of your listeners know where that is. It's a small island nation in the south of India. And the country got its independence in 1948. And then since then, there has been racial tensions between the Tamils, the minority, predominantly Hindus, and then Sinhalese, the majority, predominantly the Buddhists. So the war started after a riot in 1983 called July Black Riots, which is 40 years before today. And I was living in the north in 1987. I was 17 years old. The government soldiers came into our town and rounded up anyone between the age of 14 and 40. 2,700 of us in a ship, and took us down to the south where we were imprisoned. I was 17 and I was kept there for a couple of months and be tortured. I was able to send a message beyond the prison walls, and one of my father's good friend who was in the military came and rescued me out of that. Many of my friends died in the prison. So realizing there's no opportunity for a young Tamil boy like me in that country, my father decided to send me away to Canada at the age of 18.
Oh, my God.
And I landed in Toronto 35 years ago. 2 days later, my father was shot and killed. So I realized at the time I had two choices. Either I can, part of me died with him, but the other part became a fighter because after his untimely death, it left me with the feeling that I need to live for two people.
Well, you do really. So in this rounding up, so there's all your friends, boys, girls, everyone between...
Men.
Oh, only men?
Yeah.
Okay, all men picked up and taken away.
Correct.
And many of them never to see their families again?
Correct.
How is that? Like, how do you keep hope in a prison setting like that? Like, what's the daily life like?
Well, it's awful. It's, lack of food, lack of sleep, a lot of torture, and hearing other people screaming. It really sent chills through your bones. It was a horrible man-made hell, is what I could say. And many of my friends never made it. So I just didn't want to die there. I kept the hope that somehow I could get out and escape the prison, which eventually happened.
It is always so interesting when people can survive something like that, when people, not necessarily offered any more food, not necessarily any more injured. Some can live and some can't, and
right.
Not to blame the people who can't, but it's an extraordinary thing when you look at people coming out of prison camps or what have you. Say there's just, we had the same amount of food, lived under the same conditions, and yet for some life, that last flicker of hope is extinguished.
Yeah, I mean the human spirit can be broken, but not that easily. And I wasn't going to let them break my spirit, and I wanted to be, I wanted to live, and I think sometimes people give up hope, and I think that essentially what will kill you, and I just refused to give up, and so when I came to Canada, to answer your question, I thought I should somehow. I used to clean buildings at night as one of the three jobs I had, and I was cleaning. There's a street called Bay Street in Toronto, which is the Wall Street of Canada. And I saw this massive building, Bank of Nova Scotia, which is the third largest bank in Canada. And I was cleaning this office in one of the executives' office, massive office with nice fridge, couches, and boardrooms. And I'm like, I should aspire to this one day. And so I took a job in a mailroom on a small, tiny asset management company. And then from there, I rose to the executive.
We need to break this up into parts because, you know, from being the cleaner to even coming out of prison, getting to a safe haven, grieving your family, and then deciding I'm going to lock my eyes on that endpoint as my goal is a big journey. How do you recover from an experience like imprisonment?
Well, it's you have a choice to either live as a victim or become a victor. And for me, I thought the best revenge would be to live well. And my father sent me out of the country, and the final hug he gave me and said, "You're going to have opportunities in Canada that I never had in this country. So take maximum advantage of these opportunities the country will give you, and I just don't want you to survive. I want you to live." That was the line he used.
Wow. That's a big distinction to be making, isn't it? Because some people would have just been like, that's enough to survive it. You know, if you can survive it and stay upright and eat and sleep and be safe is, you know, I guess if you're looking at your hierarchy of needs, you meet that, but no, I'm going to go all the way.
Right. I think the success in life is sometimes just hanging on when other people want to let go. And for me, there was no question that I have to do what I could, especially after my father's death. It became the pain of his death became coal for furnace of my ambition.
So was he executed because he had given you aid and support?
No, I don't think he was picked out for that reason.
Okay.
He just happened to be a Tamil man and in a conflict zone, so you're a target.
Yeah, right.
And so coming to Canada was a shocking news. I got 2 days later, landing in Canada at the age of 18. I had $50 in my pocket. Now, you can do one or two things to pick up your affairs and start figuring out how to live, and which is exactly what I decided to do.
So you land in Canada, you got $50, you find out pretty shortly thereafter that your father
passed away,
has gone.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing you go to do when you arrive in a country where I guess you don't look like everyone else, you don't necessarily speak the language?
Correct.
How do you manage those basic things?
Yeah, it was a culture shock for sure. I mean, I spoke a little bit of English, but not as fluently as I do today. But also, forget the language for a second. It's just a new culture. I never left Sri Lanka and try to figure out everything. And I still remember that, the major highway or motorway, you call it here. And I'm like, I was in awe of this. I mean, this thing exists, you know?
Wow.
And so everything was new to me, and building tall buildings and made the tall buildings in Sri Lanka look like a small hut. And so everything was new to me. Everything was shockingly. But at the same time, the one incident happened when I got out of the airport, plane, into the customs area, immigration area, and I saw these two burly officers in uniforms. And for me, coming from a country like Sri Lanka, where people in uniforms brutalized my people, understandably, I was nervous walking by these police officers.
God, I would have been absolutely, terrible.
Yeah, and as they walked by me in the corridor, they merely looked at me, smiled, and said, "Good afternoon." At that very moment, I decided to become a Canadian, and this was refreshing to me.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That was the moment.
Right.
Because you were treated with kindness and just respect.
Yeah, it was foreign to me. Every time I saw a police officer in Sri Lanka, I used to shake. And here, they just smiled at me and said, "Good afternoon." So for me, everything was bizarre and different in a good way. And fast forward 35 years later, I had to put, a lot of sweat and hard work and, strategy and how to win in life. And my father was a inspirational figure to me. And in the book, the book was written as a gratitude for my father. And I actually say this all the time. If you can sum up this book in one word, it's gratitude. And gratitude for my parents for raising me with values, gratitude for the Uncle Fernando, I call him, who saved me from the prison. Gratitude for the Canadian visa officer in Colombo, showed me the evidence of your torture. I took my shirt off in the middle of his office, and as soon as he saw that, he gave me a visa to go to Canada. Gratitude for the country that took me in and gave me refuge. Whole bunch of things.
So that's a really important point, I think, because there is such a predominant really mean-spirited attitude amongst many people about, seeking refuge, and people who come to another country having survived torture and knowing that if they were to be returned to that place, face certain death and persecution. And there's an idea that when you take refugees in as a host nation, that you are somehow losing something. And it's wrong-headed, and it's ignorant, and it's based in all sorts of xenophobic notions. But you received a very warm welcome to Canada, and that do you think that had a part in how you then were able to be so successful?
Yeah, when I joined that small asset management company on Bay Street, first person I ran into was a young head of sales named Bill Holland, who I gave most of my success to because he became my mentor. And then I met another gentleman named Raymond Chang. He was one of the chief operating officer. Then I met another gentleman named Robert McRae. We call him Mr. McRae out of respect. He was a World War II pilot who started this business. And they were all amazingly, they treated me like, the thing is, I could not believe that I would meet three amazing people in the one firm. And so we could call that luck. And but
that helps.
Yeah, it helps. I listen, I learn, I evolve. And they were instrumental in every aspect of my life in Canada.
So how do you go from cleaning to then being seen, often if you're in an organisation and people say, well, you are the person who does the cleaning, how do they then envisage you, sitting in a boardroom, suit and tie, and, preparing spreadsheets and data and goals for the company and revenue streams. That is a big leap of imagination. I believe we have to have a break now. Oh, we've got a couple of minutes. God, thank you. To that, how do you get people to change your perception of that?
Yeah, the cleaning job was in a different firm. It was just a contract.
Okay, yeah.
So when I applied for this job as a mailroom clerk, when I landed in this company, I was the lowest man in the hierarchy per se. I was 25th employee of the firm. And today, and at the time, as I said earlier in the outset, $200 million under management. Now we run over $400 billion of assets.
Wow.
And 1,800 employees across the globe, and I'm one of the executives now. And actually, I have resigned from the business because I want to do other things in life.
Yeah, like book tours.
Global book tours. Have a purpose, than paycheck,
Yeah, but that is a big transition to make. What sort of experience did you have to bring into that role?
For the role, it's really having like a business aptitude for business and really seeing things beyond today, where the trends are going to be, and having products that can capture those trends, and then really understanding how to lead a bunch of people into success. And all those things I had to learn through my mentors and doing things wrong sometimes. I
hate the way you have to make mistakes before you get good at stuff.
Well, if you haven't made a mistake, then you haven't tried. Or maybe your dreams aren't big enough.
If you're not falling down every now and again, you're probably not learning much. It's part of the human condition. Don't love it, but we know it's a necessary part of the journey.
This is Muller with George McEncroe on Disrupt Radio.
My guest is Roy Ratnaval, who has done extraordinary things, from being in prison, tortured, fleeing his country of origin, losing his father, landing in Toronto, and then becoming, a global success story in an executive level. How did you deal with the trauma and anger and challenges of surviving an experience as such a young man and for such a traumatic event?
Yeah, I mean, the initial stages, say from around 18 to mid-20s, I was living in anger and resentment and outrage all the time, and thinking like a victim, transferring my trauma to other people and getting into fights and outbursts of anger and punching walls and all these kind of what I call the PTSD scenario. And I realized there was no good outcome by me doing all this stuff. And at one point around my late 20s, I thought maybe I should try something different.
Yeah, this punching walls.
Yeah, different
helping,
approach, you know, to become more likable, become more thoughtful about what I say. It's easily said than done because I was dealing with PTSD.
Yeah, and is it somewhere like the rage has to go somewhere, right? So if it's your hand against a brick wall,
right,
even if it makes you unlikable, it's sort of, is it somehow feeling like it's expelling it from your system?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still have PTSD. I just learned how to deal with it and also have a lot of professional helps along the way. So around late 20s, I went to a psychologist and tried to deal with that, address the issue, and it helped me quite a bit. And so then I started focusing on what it's hand, which is to focus on a career, build that, and went to university at night, got my degree, and just got myself into building a life of peace and prosperity. And it's not to say that I don't have those. I always say rage is always lurking underneath.
Yeah.
But I just learned to manage it better. And I think there's so much good in the world. As much as, you know, for me, the past events are unchangeable. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But they can serve as a lesson in dealing with struggles of life and to build a better life. We are all worthy of having a life that we desire. But in order to have that, we need to have, I say always, the two things that should be guaranteed for every individual: freedom and choice. When you have those two precious commodities, you will be rewarded for the good choices you make, and you'll be punished for the bad ones you make. And that is the price of freedom. So I was making bad choices, and then I started making good choices, and I saw the outcome was vastly different. So I thought maybe I should do more of the good stuff and get rid of the bad habits.
Like, yeah, you talk about freedom. You were absolutely stripped of your freedom for a period of time, and then once it was handed back to you, it was kind of a corrupted, well, I guess distorted, you know, feeling of like, who do I trust? How do I feel safe? How do I sleep? How do I eat? Who's safe for me to be around? You know, if that's fundamentally disrupted. But you found people. You found some wonderful mentors.
Amazing people. And so one of the reasons I wrote the book, beside telling my story, telling the Tamil collective story, is also to pay an homage to free societies. And I think that one of the things sometimes people who are born into freedom do not take those freedoms they probably take it for granted. And for me, I wasn't born into freedom, and I have freedom, and I'm fiercely protective of that freedom. It is so easy to denounce freedom. It's hard to acquire it. Trust me, people like me can tell you this. And so one of the reasons I wrote this book is because the Western civilization, to me, still the most fairest and freest society ever created by human beings. And they're not perfect, but they're 1,000 times better than what I left behind. So I think what we should do is, instead of complaining about things that we have today, be grateful for a society that we built. Because progress has been made doesn't mean we stop. We should continue to progress. And denying progress has been made doesn't make you a better person either. I think it is every single one of us responsibility, whether you're born in these free nations or came to this free nation, to protect it, embrace it, make it better. When you leave this planet, you have to make sure that you are leaving the land you were born in or acquired in better than you have found it. And that's the message. That's
your duty as a person. I think when we went through lockdowns in Victoria and in other states and territories, but I know Victoria was particularly hard hit, we got a tiny, 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 tiny whiff of what other people in the world have endured, where you weren't allowed to leave your home, you're under curfews, policed, fined, all those things. People weren't actually held in prison and tortured and had families killed, but the pushback against that was, maybe just a little taste of what can happen if you don't appreciate the freedoms that you have.
100%. I think that the COVID was a little bit of a test to show people what can happen when government decides to do certain things. I'm not talking anything conspiracy here. All I'm saying is I think we all should die on this hill called freedom, and we have to protect it. There are people who went to war, in the 40s to protect fascism from taking over the world and gave their life. And I think the only way to honor them is to stand up for the values they fought for, which is freedom and democracy. And they aren't perfect. These societies aren't perfect, but I can tell you they're 1,000 times better than what's out there. That's why people want to flee those countries like Sri Lanka to come to Australia, Canada, UK, USA, and places like that.
Yeah, and everybody loves their homeland. It's a very difficult thing to move away. You are here promoting your book in part, and it's been wonderful to have you as our guest. The name of the book is Prisoner Number 1056, and that's obviously the name that you were given when you had no freedom. People can get you on tour, find you. Where will you be next? I'm
off to Malaysia next, and then Singapore, then the UK. You could buy this book on Amazon. It's Amazon, I guess you call it here.
Wonderful.
Prisoner 1056.
Prisoner 1056. My guest has been Roy Ratnaval. Thank you so much for joining me and for writing this book. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you for having me.